Chapter 16. Why Not Birth Control Clinics in America. Footnote. This chapter, in substance and largely in language, appeared under the present title in the March 1920 issue of American Medicine, and is incorporated in this book by courtesy of that publication. End footnote. The absurd cruelty of permitting thousands of women each year to go through abortions to prevent the aggravation of diseases for which they are under treatment assuredly cannot be much longer ignored by the medical profession. Responsibility for the inestimable damage done by the practice of permitting patients suffering from certain ailments to become pregnant because of their ignorance of contraceptives, when the physician knows that if pregnancy goes to its full term it will hasten the disease and lead to the patient's death, must in all fairness be laid at his door. What these dangers are, and in what dangers are involved in pregnancy, are known to every practitioner of standing. Specialists have not been negligent in pointing out the situation. Eager to enhance or protect their reputations in the profession, they continually call out to one another, "Don't let the patient bear a child! Don't let pregnancy continue!" The warning has been sounded most often, perhaps, in the cases of tubercular women. In view of the fact that the tubercular process becomes exacerbated either during pregnancy or after childbirth, most authorities recommend that abortion be induced as a matter of routine in all tubercular women, says Dr. J. Whitridge Williams, obstetrician-in-chief to the Johns Hopkins Hospital. In his treatise on obstetrics, Dr. Thomas Watts Eden, obstetrician and gynecologist to Charing Cross Hospital and member of the staffs of other notable British hospitals, extends but does not complete the list in this paragraph on page 652 of his Practical Obstetrics. Certain of the conditions enumerated form absolute indications for the induction of abortion. These are nephritis, uncompensated valvular lesions of the heart, advanced tuberculosis, insanity, irremediable malignant tumors, hydatidiform mole, uncontrollable uterine hemorrhage, and acute hydramnios. We know that abortion, when performed by skilled hands under right conditions, bring almost no danger to the life of the patient, and we also know that particular diseases can be much more easily combated after such an abortion than during a pregnancy allowed to come full term. But why not adopt the easier, safer, less repulsive course and prevent conception altogether? Why put these thousands of women who each year undergo such abortions to the pain they entail and in whatever danger attends them? Why continue to send home women to whom pregnancy is a grave danger with the futile advice, "Now don't get this way again"? They are sent back to their husbands who have generations of passions and passions claim to outlet. They are sent back without being given information as to how to prevent the dangerous pregnancy, and are expected, presumably, to depend for their safety upon the husband's continence. The wife and husband who are thrown together to bring about once more the same condition. Back comes the patient again in a few months to be aborted and told once more not to do it again. Does any physician believe that this picture is overdrawn? I have known of many such cases. A recent one that came under my observation was that of a woman who suffered from a disease of the kidneys. 5 times she was taken to a maternity hospital in an ambulance after falling in offices or in the street. One of the foremost gynecologists of America sent her out 3 times without giving her information as to the contraceptive means which would have prevented a repetition of this experience. Why does this situation exist? We do not question the good intent nor the high purposes of these physicians. We know that they observe a high standard of ethics and that they are working for the uplift of the race. But here is a situation that is absurd, hideously absurd. What is the matter? Several factors contribute to this state of affairs. First, the subject of contraception has been kept in the dark, even in medical colleges and in hospitals. Abortion has been openly discussed as a necessity under certain conditions, but the subject of contraception, as any physician will admit, has not yet been brought to the front. It has escaped specialized attention in the laboratories and the research departments. Thus there has been no professional stamp of approval by great bodies of experimenters. The result is that the average physician has felt that contraceptive methods are not yet established as certainties, and has for that reason refused to direct their use. Specialists are so busy with their own particular subjects, and general practitioners are so taken up with their daily routine, that they cannot give to the problem of contraception the attention it must have. Consultation rooms in charge of reputable physicians who have specialized in contraception, assisted by registered nurses, in a word clinics designed for the specialty, would meet this crying need. Such clinics should deal with each woman individually, taking into account her particular disease, her temperament, her mentality, and her condition, both physical and economic. Their sole function would be to prevent pregnancy. In accomplishing this purpose, a higher standard of hygiene is attained. Not only would a burden be removed from the physician who sends a woman to such a clinic, but there would be an improvement in the woman's general condition, which would in a number of ways reflect itself in a benefit to her family. All this for the diseased woman. But every argument that can be made for preventive medicine can be made for birth control clinics for the use of the woman who has not yet lost her health. Sound and vigorous at the time of her marriage, she could remain so if given advice as to by what means she could space her children and limit their number. When she is not given such information, she is plunged blindly into married life, and in a few years is likely to find herself with a large family, herself diseased and damaged, an unfit breeder of the unfit, and still ignorant. What are the fruits of this woeful ignorance in which women have been kept? First, a tremendous infant mortality. Hundreds of thousands of babies dying annually of diseases which flourish in poverty and neglect. Next, the rapid increase of the feeble-minded, of criminal types, and of the pathetic victims of toil in the child labor factories. Another result is the familiar overcrowding of tenements, the forcing of the children into the street, the ensuing prostitution, alcoholism, and almost universal physical and moral unfitness. Those who abhor conditions point to a blunder upon the part of those to whom we have entrusted the care of the health of the individual, family, and the race. The medical profession, neglecting the principle involved in preventive medicine, has permitted these conditions to come about. If they were unavoidable, we should have to bear with them, but they are not unavoidable, as shown by facts and figures from other countries where contraceptive information is available. In Holland, for instance, where the information concerning contraceptives has been accessible to the people through clinics and pamphlets since 1881, the general death rate and the infant mortality rate have fallen until they are the lowest in Europe. Amsterdam and The Hague have the lowest infant mortality rates of any cities in the world. It is good to note that the first of the birth control clinics of Holland followed shortly after a thorough and enthusiastic discussion of the subject at an international medical congress in Amsterdam in 1878. The Dutch Neo-Malthusian League was founded in 1881. The first birth control clinic in the world was opened in 1885 by Dr. Aletta Jacobs in Amsterdam. So great were the results attained that there has been a remarkable increase in the wealth, stamina, stature, and longevity of the people, as well as a gradual increase in the population. These clinics must not be confused with the white enameled rooms which we associate with the term in America. They are ordinary offices with the necessary equipment, or rooms in the homes of the nurses, fitted out for the work. They are places for consultation and examination, opened by specially trained nurses who have been instructed by Dr. J. Rutgers, of The Hague, secretary of the Neo-Malthusian League, who has devoted his life to this work. There have been more than 50 nurses trained specially for this work by Dr. Rutgers. As a nurse completes her course of training, she establishes herself in a community, and her place of consultation is called a clinic. The general results of this service are best judged by tables included in the annual summary of marriages, births, and deaths in England, Wales, etc. for 1912. In Amsterdam, the birth rate dropped from 37.1 for the period of 1881 to 1885 to 24.7 for 1906 and 23.3 in 1912. During the same periods, the death rate fell from 25.1 to 13.1, and in 1912 to 11.2. Infant mortality for the same period fell from 203 for each 1,000 living births to 90, and in 1912 to 64. Illegitimate fertility also decreased. Results in other cities, as shown by the table at the end of this chapter, are exactly similar. In the Australian Commonwealth, where birth control is taken as a matter of course, and information concerning contraceptives is available to the masses, the births were so well distributed in 1915 that while the birth rate was 27.3, there was an infant death rate of only 10.7. New Zealand, which is also one of the typical birth control countries, had a birth rate of 25.3 and an infant death rate of only 9.1 for the same year. These figures are in marked and happy contrast with those for the birth registration of the United States, where the reports for 1916 show a birth rate of 24.8, but an infant death rate of 14.7. A similar comparison may be made with the German Empire in 1913, where there was a birth rate of 27.5 in 1913 and an infant mortality rate of 15. In those countries, birth control information is not so generally within the reach of the masses, and consequently, the largest percentage of births come to the class least able to bring children to full maturity, as indicated in the infant mortality rates. In conclusion, I am going to make a statement which may at first seem exaggerated, but which is nevertheless carefully considered. The effort toward racial progress that is being made today by the medical profession, by social workers, by the various charitable and philanthropic organizations, and by the state institutions for the physically and mentally unfit, is practically wasted. All these forces are in a very emphatic sense marking time. They will continue to mark time until the medical profession recognizes the fact that the ever-increasing tide of the unfit is overwhelming all that these agencies are doing for society. They will continue to mark time until they get at the source of these destructive conditions and apply a fundamental remedy. That remedy is birth control. End of section 17. Chapter 17. Progress We Have Made. The silence of the centuries has been broken. The wrongs of woman and the rights of woman have found voices. These voices differ from all others that have been raised in woman's behalf. They are not the individual protests of great feminine minds, nor the masculine remedies for masculine oppression suggested by the stricken consciences of a few men. Greater voices are heard, both of women and of men, but intermingled with them are millions of voices demanding freedom. Let it be repeated that movements mothered by emancipated women are often deceptive in character. The demand for suffrage, the agitation against child labor, the regulation of working hours for women, the insistence upon mothers' pensions, are palliatives all. Yet as woman's understanding develops and she learns to think at the urgence of her own inner nature rather than at the dictates of men, she moves on from these palliatives to fundamental remedies. So at the crest of the wave of woman's revolt comes the movement for voluntary motherhood. Not a separate, isolated movement, but the manifestation of a cosmic force, the force that moves the wave itself. The walls of the cloister have fallen before the cries of a rising womanhood. The barriers of prurient puritanism are being demolished. Free woman has torn the veil of indecency from the secrets of life to reveal them in their power and their purity. Womanhood yet bound has beheld and understood. A public whose thoughts and opinions have been governed by men and by women engulfed in the old order has been shocked awake. Sneers and jests at birth control are giving way to the reverent understanding of the needs of woman. They who today deny the right of a woman to control her own body speak with the hardihood of invincible ignorance, or with the folly of those blind ones who in all ages have opposed the light of progress. Few there are to insist openly that woman remain a passive instrument of reproduction. The subject of birth control is being lifted out of the mire into which it was cast by Puritanism and given its proper place among the sciences and the ideals of this generation. With this effort has come an illumination of all other social problems. Society is beginning to give ear to the promise of modern womanhood. When you have ceased to chain me, I shall by the virtue of a free motherhood remake the world. It would be miraculous indeed if that victory which has been won had been gained without great toil, insufferable anguish, and sacrifice such as all persons experience when they dare to brave the conventions of the dead past or blaze a trail for a new order. But where the vision is clear, the faith deep, forces unseen rally to assist and carry one over barriers which would otherwise have been insurmountable. No part of this wave of woman's emancipation has won its way without such vision and faith. This is the one movement in which pioneering was unnecessary. The cry for deliverance always goes up. It is its own pioneer. The facts have always stared us in the face. No one who has worked among women can be ignorant of them. I remember that ever since I was a child, the idea of large families associated itself with poverty in my mind. As I grew to womanhood, and found myself working in hospitals and in the homes of the rich and the poor, the association between the two ideas grew stronger. In every home of the poor, women asked me the same question. As far back as 1900, I began to inquire of my associates among the nurses what one could tell these worried women, who ask constantly, "What can I do?" It is the voice of the elemental urge of woman. It has always been there, and whether we have heeded it or neglected it, we have always heard it. Out of this cry came the birth control movement. Economic conditions have naturally made this elemental need more plain. Sometimes they have lent a more desperate voice to woman's cry for freedom. Men and women have arisen since Knowlton and Robert Dale Owen, to advocate the use of contraceptives. But aside from these two, none has come forward to separate it from other issues of sex freedom. But the birth control movement, as a movement for women's basic freedom, was born of that unceasing cry of the socially repressed, spiritually stifled woman who is constantly demanding, "What can I do to avoid more children?" When it came time to rouse new public interest in birth control and organize a movement, it was found expedient to employ direct and drastic methods to awaken a slumbering public. The Woman Rebel, a monthly magazine, was established to proclaim the gospel of revolt. When its mission was accomplished and the words birth control were on their way to be a symbol of women's freedom in all civilized tongues, it went out of existence. The deceptive obscenity law, invoked oftener to repress womanhood and smother scientific knowledge than to restrain the distribution of verbal and pictorial pornography, was deliberately challenged. This course had two purposes. It challenged the constitutionality of the law and thereby brought knowledge of contraceptives to hundreds of thousands of women. The first general, organized effort reached in various ways to all parts of the United States. Particular attention was paid to the mining districts of West Virginia and Montana, the mill towns of New England, and the cotton districts of the southern states. Men and women from all these districts welcomed the movement. They sent letters pledging their loyalty and their active assistance. They participated directly and indirectly in the protests which awakened the country. As time went on, the work was extended to various foreign elements of the population, this being made possible by the enthusiastic cooperation of workers who speak the foreign languages. Leagues were formed to organize those who favored changing the laws. Lectures delivered throughout the United States. Articles were written by eminent physicians, scientists, reformers, and revolutionists. Debates were arranged. Newspapers and magazines of all kinds, classes, and languages gave the subject of birth control serious attention, taking one side or the other of the discussion that was aroused. New books on the subject began to appear. Books by foreign authors were reprinted and distributed in the United States. The Birth Control Review, edited by voluntary effort and supported by a stock company of women who make contributions instead of taking dividends, was founded and continues its work. After a year's study in foreign countries for the purpose of supplementing the knowledge gained in my 14 years as a nurse, I came back to the United States determined to open a clinic. I had decided that there could be no better way of demonstrating to the public the necessity of birth control and the welcome it would receive than by taking the knowledge of contraceptive methods directly to those who needed it most. A clinic was opened in Brooklyn. There 480 women received information before the police closed the consulting rooms and arrested Ethel Byrne, a registered nurse, Fania Mindell, a translator, and myself. The purpose of this clinic was to demonstrate to the public the practicability and the necessity of such institutions. All women who came seeking information were working men's wives. All had children. No unmarried girls came at all. Men came whose wives had nursing children and could not come. Women came from the farthest parts of Long Island, from cities in Massachusetts and Connecticut, and even more distant places. Mothers brought their married daughters. Some whose ages were from 25 to 35 looked 50, but the clinic gave them new hope to face the years ahead. These women invariably expressed their love for their children, but voiced a common plea for means to avoid others, in order that they might give sufficient care to those already born. They wanted them to grow up decent. For 10 days the 2 rooms of this clinic were crowded to the utmost. Then came the police. We were hauled off to jail and eventually convicted of a crime. Ethel Byrne instituted a hunger strike for 11 days, which attracted attention throughout the nation. It brought to the public notice the fact that women were ready to die for the principle of voluntary motherhood. So strong was the sentiment evoked that Governor Whitman pardoned Mrs. Byrne. No single act of self-sacrifice in the history of the birth control movement has done more to awaken the conscience of the public or to arouse the courage of women than did Ethel Byrne's deed of uncompromising resentment at the outrage of jailing women who were attempting to disseminate knowledge which would emancipate the motherhood of America. Courage like hers, and like that of others who have undergone arrest and imprisonment, or who night after night and day after day have faced street crowds to speak or to sell literature, the faith and the untiring labors of still others who have not come into public notice, have given the movement its dauntless character and assure the final victory. One dismal fact has become clear long before the Brownsville Clinic was opened. The medical profession as a whole had ignored the tragic cry of womanhood for relief from forced maternity. The private practitioners, one after another, shook their heads and replied, "It cannot be done. It is against the law." And the same answer came from clinics and public hospitals. The decision of the New York State Court of Appeals has disposed of that objection, however, though as yet few physicians have cared to make public the fact that they take advantage of the decision. While the decision of the lower courts in my own case was upheld, partly because I was a nurse and not a physician, the court incidentally held that under the laws as they now stand in New York, any physician has a right to impart information concerning contraceptives to women as a measure for curing or preventing disease. The United States Supreme Court threw out my appeal without consideration of the merits of the case. Therefore, the decision of the New York State Court of Appeals stands. And under that decision, a physician has a right, and it is therefore his duty, to prescribe contraceptives in such cases, at least as those involving disease. It is true that Section 1142 of the Penal Code of New York State does not accept the medical man and does not allow him to instruct his patient in birth control methods, even though she is suffering from tuberculosis, syphilis, kidney disorders, or heart disease. Without looking farther, the physicians had let that section go at its face value. No doctor had questioned either its purpose or its legal scope. The medical profession was content to let this apparent limitation upon its right stand, and it remained for a woman to go to jail to demonstrate the fact that under another section of the same code, 1145, the physician had the vital right just described. It is safe to say that many physicians do not even yet know of their legal rights in this matter. But here is what the New York State Court of Appeals said on January 8, 1918, in an opinion thus far unquestioned, and which is the law of the state. Secondly, by Section 1145 of the Penal Law, physicians are excepted from the provisions of this act under circumstances therein mentioned. This section reads, "An article or instrument used or applied by physicians lawfully practicing, or by their direction or prescription, for the cure or prevention of disease, is not an article of indecent or immoral nature or use within this article. The supplying of such articles to such physicians, or by their direction or prescription, is not an offense under this article." This exception in behalf of the physician does not permit advertisements regarding such matters, nor promiscuous advice to patients irrespective of their condition. But it is broad enough to protect the physician who in good faith gives such help or advice to a married person to cure or prevent disease, by Webster's International Dictionary, is defined to be an alteration in the state of the body or of some of its organs, interrupting or disturbing the performance of the vital functions, and causing or threatening pain and sickness, illness, disorder. The protection thus afforded the physician would also extend to the druggist, or vendor, acting upon the physician's prescription or order. Section 1142, which shamelessly classes contraceptive information with abortion and things obscene, still stands, but under the decision of the Court of Appeals it is the law of New York State that physicians have the right which they seemingly were denied. Which is probably the fact also in many other states, for the so-called obscenity laws are modeled more or less after the same pattern. One of the chief results of the Brownsville Clinic was that of establishing for physicians a right which they neglected to establish for themselves, but which they are bound, in the very nature of things, to exercise to an increasing degree. Similar tests by women in other states would doubtless establish the right elsewhere in America. We know of some 35 arrests of women and men who have dared entrench prejudice and the law to further the cause of birth control. The persistent work in behalf of the movement, attended as it is by danger of fines and jail sentences, seems to puzzle the authorities. Sometimes they dismiss the arrested persons, sometimes they fine them, sometimes they imprison them. But the protests went on, and through these self-sacrifices word of the movement went constantly to more and more people. Each of these arrests brought added publicity. Each became a center of local agitation. Each brought a part of the public, at least face to face, with the issue between the women of America and this barbarous law. Many thousands of letters have been answered, and thousands of women have been given personal consultations. Each letter and consultation means another center of influence from which the gospel of voluntary motherhood spreads. Forced thus to the front, the problems of birth control and the right of voluntary motherhood have been brought more and more to the attention of medical students, nurses, midwives, physicians, scientists, and sociologists. A new literature ranging all the way from discussion of the means of preventing conception to the social, political, ethical, moral, and spiritual possibilities of birth control is coming into being. Woman's cry for liberty is infusing itself into the thoughts and the consciences of the aspirations of the intellectual leaders, as well as into the idealism of society. It is but a few years since it was said of the woman rebel that it was the first unveiled head raised in America. It is but a few years since men as well as women trembled at the temerity of a public discussion in which the subject of sex was mentioned. But, measured in progress, it is a far cry from those days. The public has read of birth control on the first page of the newspaper. It has discussed it in meetings and in clubs. It has been a favorite topic of discussion at correct teas. The scientist is giving it reverent and profound attention. Even the minister, seeking to keep abreast of the times, proclaims it from the pulpit. And everywhere serious-minded women and men, those with the vision, with the comprehension of present and future needs of society, are working to bring this message to those who have not yet realized its immense and regenerating import. The American public, in a word, has been permeated with the message of birth control. Its reaction to that message has been exceedingly encouraging. People by the thousands have flocked to the meetings. Only the official mind, serving ancient prejudices under the cloak of law and order, has been in opposition. It is plain that Puritanism is in the throes of a lingering death. If anyone doubts it, let it be remembered that the same people who, a few years ago, formed the official opinion of Puritanism have so far forsaken Puritanism as to flood the country with millions of pamphlets discussing sex matters and venereal disease. This literature was distributed by the United States government, by state governments, by the YMCA, the YWCA, and similar organizations. It treated the physiology of sex far more definitely than has birth control literature. This official educational barrage was at once a splendid salute to the right of women and men to know their own bodies and the last heavy firing in the main battle against ignorance in the field of sex. What remains now is but to take advantage of the victories. What does it all mean? It means that American womanhood is blasting its way through the debris of crumbling moral and religious systems toward freedom. It means that the path is all but clear. It means that woman has but to press on, more courageously, more confidently, with her face set more firmly toward the goal. End of section 18. Chapter 18. The Goal. What is the goal of woman's upward struggle? Is it voluntary motherhood? Is it general freedom? Or is it the birth of a new race? For freedom is not fruitless but prolific of higher things. Being the most sacred aspect of woman's freedom, voluntary motherhood is motherhood in its highest and most holiest form. It is motherhood unchained, motherhood ready to obey its own urge to remake the world. Voluntary motherhood implies a new morality, a vigorous, constructive, liberated morality. That morality will, first of all, prevent the submergence of womanhood into motherhood. It will set its face against the conversion of women into mechanical maternity and toward the creation of a new race. Woman's role has been that of an incubator and little more. She has given birth to an incubated race. She has given to her children what little she was permitted to give, but of herself, of her personality, almost nothing. In the mass she has brought forth quantity, not quality. The requirement of a male-dominated civilization has been numbers. She has met that requirement. It is the essential function of voluntary motherhood to choose its own mate, to determine the time of childbearing, and to regulate strictly the number of offspring. Natural affection upon her part, instead of selection dictated by social or economic advantage, will give her a better fatherhood for her children. The exercise of her right to decide how many children she will have, and when she will have them, will procure for her the time necessary to the development of other faculties than that of reproduction. She will give play to her tastes, her talents, and her ambitions. She will become a full-rounded human being. Thus and only thus will woman be able to transmit to her offspring those qualities which make for a greater race. The importance of developing these qualities in the mothers for transmission to the children is apparent when we recall certain well-established principles of biology. In all of the animal species below the human, motherhood has a clearly discernible superiority over fatherhood. It is the first pulse of organic life. Fatherhood is the fertilizing element. Its development, compared to that of the mother cell, is comparatively new. Likewise, its influence upon the progeny is comparatively small. There are weighty authorities who assert that through the female alone comes these modifications of form, capacity, and ability which constitute evolutionary progress. It was the mothers who first developed cunning in chase, ingenuity in escaping enemies, skill in obtaining food, and adaptability. It was they also who attained unfailing discretion in leadership, adaptation to environment, and boldness in attack. When the animal kingdom as a whole is surveyed, these stand out as distinctly feminine traits. They stand out also as the characteristics by which the progress of a species is measured. Why is all this true of the lower species, yet not true of human beings? The secret is revealed by one significant fact. The female's functions in these animals are not limited to motherhood alone. Every organ and faculty is fully employed and perfected. Through the development of the individual mother, better and higher types of animals are produced and carried forward. In a word, natural law makes the female the expression and the conveyor of racial efficiency. Birth control itself, often denounced as a violation of natural law, is nothing more or less than the facilitation of the process of weeding out the unfit, of preventing the birth of defectives or of those who will become defectives. So, in compliance with nature's working plan, we must permit womanhood its full development before we can expect of it efficient motherhood. If we are to make racial progress, the development of womanhood must precede motherhood in every individual woman. Then and only then can the mother cease to be an incubator and be a mother indeed. Then only can she transmit to her sons and daughters the qualities which make strong individuals and collectively a strong race. Voluntary motherhood also implies the right of marriage without maternity. Two utterly different functions are developed in the two relationships. In order to give the mate relationship its full and free play, it is necessary that no woman should be a mother against her will. There are other reasons, of course, reasons more frequently emphasized, but the reason just mentioned should never be overlooked. It is as important to the race as to the woman, for through it is developed that high love impulse which, conveyed to the child, attunes and perfects its being. Marriage, quite aside from parentage, also gives two people invaluable experience. When parentage follows in its proper time, it is a better parentage because of the mutual adjustment and development, because of the knowledge thus gained. Few couples are fitted to understand the sacred mystery of child life until they have solved some of the problems arising out of their own love lives. Maternal love, which usually follows upon a happy, satisfying mate love, becomes a strong and urgent craving. It then exists for two powerful, creative functions. First for its own sake, and then for the sake of further enriching the conjugal relationship. It is from such soil that new life should spring. It is the inherent right of the new life to have its inception in such physical ground, in such spiritual atmosphere. The child thus born is indeed a flower of love and tremendous joy. It has within it the seeds of courage and power. This child will have the greatest strength to surmount hardships, to withstand tyrannies, to set still higher the mark of human achievement. Shall we pause here to speak again of the rights of womanhood, in itself and of itself to be absolutely free? We have talked of this right so much in these pages only to learn that in the end a free womanhood turns of its own desire to free and happy motherhood, a motherhood which does not submerge the woman, but which is enriched because she is unsubmerged. When we voice, then, the necessity of setting the feminine spirit utterly and absolutely free, thought turns naturally not to the rights of woman, nor indeed of the mother, but to the rights of the child, of all children in the world. For this is the miracle of free womanhood, that in its freedom it becomes the race mother, and opens its heart in fruitful affection for humanity. How narrow, how pitifully puny has become motherhood in its chains! The modern motherhood enfolds one or two adoring children of its own blood, and cherishes, protects, and loves them. It does not reach out to all children. When motherhood is a high privilege, not a sordid, slavish requirement, it will encircle all. Its deep, passionate intensity will overflow the limits of blood relationship. Its beauty will shine upon all, for its beauty is of the soul, whose power of enfoldment is unbounded. When motherhood becomes the fruit of a deep yearning, not the result of ignorance or accident, its children will become the foundation of a new race. There will be no killing of babies in the womb by abortion, nor through neglect in founding homes, nor will there be infanticide. Neither will children die by inches in mills and factories. No man will dare to break a child's life upon the wheel of toil. Voluntary motherhood will not be passive, resigned, or weak. Out of its craving will come forth a fierceness of love for its fruits that will make such men as remain unawakened stand aghast in its fury when offended. The tigress is less terrible in defense of her offspring than will be the human mother. The daughters of such women will not be given over to injustice and to prostitution. The sons will not perish in industry nor upon the battlefield. Nor could they meet these all too common fates if an undaunted motherhood were there to defend. Childhood and youth will be too valuable in the eyes of society to waste them in the murderous mills of blind greed and hate. This is the dawn. Womanhood shakes off its bondage. It asserts its right to be free. In its freedom, its thoughts turn to the race. Like begets like. We gather perfect fruit from perfect trees. The race is but the amplification of its mother's body, the multiplication of flesh habitations, beautified and perfected for souls akin to the mother soul. The relentless efforts of reactionary authority to suppress the message of birth control and of voluntary motherhood are futile. The powers of reaction cannot now prevent the feminine spirit from breaking its bonds. When the last fetter falls, the evils that have resulted from the suppression of woman's will to freedom will pass. Child slavery, prostitution, feeble-mindedness, physical deterioration, hunger, oppression, and war will disappear from the earth. In their subjection, women have not been brave enough, strong enough, pure enough to bring forth great sons and daughters. Abused soil brings forth stunted growths. An abused motherhood has brought forth a low order of humanity. Great beings come forth at the call of high desire. Fearless motherhood goes out in love and passion for justice to all mankind. It brings forth fruits after its own kind. When the womb becomes fruitful through the desire of an inspiring love, another Newton will come forth to unlock further the secrets of the earth and the stars. There will come a Plato who will be understood, a Socrates who will drink no hemlock, and a Jesus who will not die upon the cross. These and the race that is to be in America await upon a motherhood that is to be sacred because it is free. End of section 19 and End of Woman and the New Race by Margaret Sanger. Thank you for listening.